Hey there, Allison again with my analysis of Ghost in the Shell, the 1995 Japanese animation film by Mamoru Oshii. This film is a classic both as an animated film and a sci-fi film. Ghost in the Shell has influenced so many films in the genre, both visually and thematically, and when it comes to theme, it's hard to come close to Ghost in the Shell. Also visuals, but I want to focus on the theme. This movie tackles some of the most burning questions when it comes to technology. It's incredible thinking of how primitive the technologies discussed in this film were in 1995, and uncanny how accurate the predictions were. Anyone following subjects like AI, the fusion of humans with machines, and the network knows that we're closer than ever to this becoming a reality. A lot of people will doubt this, but honestly, most of you watching this video right now will probably be faced with the opportunity to somehow either implant an electronic device directly into your body for non-medical use, or to somehow directly connect your mind to an electronic device or the network. Of course, with time, these things will become available to the masses and commonplace, much like how cell phones used to be bulky and expensive, but now even the poor end up with smartphones. I know a lot of this isn't directly related to the movie, but it is exactly the type of discussions provoked by this movie and movies like it. I hope that watching this movie will inspire great thinkers to predict philosophical dilemmas of even more distant futures, since the future predicted here is within our grasp. Anyways, on to the themes of Ghost in the Shell itself. The first would be the general theme of birth, sex, and death. This also ties into the evolution theme I'll talk about later. I love how brilliant this movie is and how all of these themes are interconnected and inseparable. The birth aspect makes itself known pretty early on in the credit sequence. The Major, or a cyborg just like her, is being made. The steps in her creation directly parallel a natural mammalian gestation and birth, maybe even some insemination symbolism as well. The body goes through development in liquid and is seen in the fetal position. We see water being expelled from a tank, possibly a parallel to the water breaking during birth. The body travels through a canal and emerges headfirst from the liquid whole and is dried, much like a newborn having the amniotic fluid wiped off of them. Sex is pretty prominent as well. We have a heavy sprinkling of nudity throughout. This is particularly because of this genre of anime having a lot of female nudity in it, as well as violence. But aside from the nudity, there is some sexual tension between Bato and Motoko, but I'll touch more on them later. There is a lot of talk of breeding and evolution creating genetic variation as a defense, but I'll touch a bit more on that later as well. The Major and the Puppet Master are sort of forming a sexual union to create a genetically unique offspring. The American doctor even jokes about how the program may have wanted to stay in Section 9 because he had a girlfriend or something there. This was said as a joke, but we linger on his face to ponder its validity. Death is seen as a natural and necessary part of the process of life. The Puppet Master's head is blown off as well as the Major's, but not before their offspring has been born in what was formerly the Major's head. This metaphor is made painfully obvious when Bato finds a child's body to replace the Major's. The movie ends with the offspring asking itself what the infant will do next. Also, the Bible verse that the offspring speaks to Bato is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. This ties into the process of maturity an offspring might go through, and also the evolutionary process of the species as a whole. The next verse of that chapter, verse 12, states, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known," which was quoted later in the film. I think ties more into the themes of mind-body dualism, also known as Cartesian dualism, named after René Descartes, but I'll cover that after I talk about the next theme, which is evolution. Evolution ties directly into the sex, birth, and death theme, but is really a whole subtopic on its own in this movie. The concept that variety is strength in general, but specifically genetic variation, is heavy throughout Ghost in the Shell. Early on, we see Major Motoko talking to Togasa about how he was chosen to be a part of the team because his mind and body are almost entirely human, and his character is more human as a family man and a moral man. She explains that this is important because it contrasts the rest of the team and allows for any weaknesses to be covered by their diversity. She refers to overspecialization as slow death. This is true in almost every way, from a team of police to a company that only produces one specific product, to a species of animal that can only thrive in very specific conditions. The theme of evolution in the film then narrows to biological evolution and then to human evolution. The symbolism is heavy in the final battle. We see it takes place in a museum or some sort of futuristic religious institution. As the battle unfolds, the tank riddles the walls with bullets, destroying the fossil displays. It then shoots up a display of the evolutionary tree. The bullet fire stops just shy of the top of the tree where hominis, meaning man, is written. This is clearly symbolism for how evolution has progressed and how the technologies invented by man are totally going to revolutionize the future of human evolution and possibly evolution in general. Later, we see Motoko's body on top of the tank with an image of the tree behind, sort of showing her at the base. This is showing that with her begins the new evolutionary tree, after her union with the puppet master creates a whole new class of conscious beings. The puppet master has a monologue about genetic diversity after Motoko asks why he doesn't just release copies of himself onto the net. Of course, his reasoning being that copies will all share the same weaknesses, but a combination of their consciousnesses would create a unique offspring that could then go on to create more offspring, each also unique, making it nearly impossible for all of them to be wiped out. This way he can accept his own eventual death, knowing that he may live on through his offspring. This is clearly the function of biological evolution and genetic diversity amongst species. His attitudes about accepting death as long as he may live on in his descendants is more or less humanity as a whole's. After they fuse, Motoko's body is replaced with a child's, symbolizing the fact that she is no longer the major nor the puppet master, but their child. She says this plainly. She also refers to herself as an infant and remarks that the net is vast and infinite, and the net will be the environment in which this new form of human evolution will take place. Okay, moving on to probably the biggest, most complicated, and thought-provoking theme, the mind-body problem theme. As I said earlier, this can also be referred to as Cartesian dualism. This philosophy, made famous by René Descartes, generally states that the body is physical, but the mind is not. Many people, I would even say most, believe this, but many in the world of philosophy and science don't. I believe the filmmaker doesn't either. Meaning this film is trying to say that the mind is, in fact, a mere phenomenon of the physical reality in which we inhabit, and not something inexplicable or immaterial. I think this is plainly shown in the examples of the ghost-hacked individuals. Merely by rearranging the data in their cyberbrains, they can have one identity erased and be given an entirely new one. After the garbage man is told that he may never recover who he was, and he may even experience some residual false memories, Motoko glares on through the glass. Bateau states that even simulated experiences and dreams exist as information and are simultaneously reality and fantasy. In other words, Bateau is saying that the reality we perceive is really just information which is subject to change. This, by extension, applies to the mind itself, because our mind or consciousness really is just the aggregation of our experiences and perceived reality. And if those can be changed entirely by manipulating the data, then yes, the mind isn't some sort of immaterial thing, but part of our physical world. I think Ghost in the Shell also expresses this in how the Puppet Master program was just meant to mine data from all over the net and spontaneously became conscious. It wasn't even an actual AI program meant to simulate consciousness. Even when they examine the body he eventually inhabits, we see that there is evidence of an actual ghost in his entirely cybernetic brain. This mind-body dilemma is much of the conflict that our main character, Major Motoko Kusanagi, struggles with. She is pondering her own mind and whether or not it is synthetic, like the memories of the garbage man or the supposed ghost observed in the puppet master. She plainly states her anxiety to Bateau that she has no way of knowing for sure if she actually has a human mind at all, or if her brain is really a reprogrammed brain of someone who has died. The final theme is humanity, and what qualifies someone as human. This theme is explored through Major Motoko as she questions and comes to terms with where she, as a cyborg, really fits in human society. Motoko is not quite human in a typical sense. She seems very cold and practical. She's completely casual and comfortable with her nudity. Bateau is constantly trying to cover her up or turning away from her nudity. Bateau treats her more human than she treats herself. He even may have feelings for her, which she either is unaware of or ignores. She first appears to contemplate these things when the interpreter woman is being ghost-tagged. She takes a long look back, probably seeing herself in the woman. We see little explosions in her brain scan as her mind is being broken by the virus. This is symbolism for the idea that our identities are mere data susceptible to change or destruction. Motoko is probably thinking the same thing, and as I said, putting herself in that position and wondering if this has already happened to her. This doubt of the validity of her own identity is what motivates her to seek out the puppet master. She originally felt empathy for his ghost-hacked victims. Later, as the garbage man is being interrogated, there is some strong visual symbolism for the inner dilemma of the Major. She stares intently through the glass. All the while, we see both her and her reflection. Her reflection is slightly off in color, as reference to the Bible quote we hear in the next scene about seeing through a glass darkly, but then seeing face to face. The visual dualism is a reference to the mind-body dualism. She is having her own mind-body problem as she wonders if her mind is genuine or a fabrication. The next shot is just her through the glass, distorted in color, perhaps telling the audience that the mind-body dualism is a fallacy and her perception of herself is all there really is. The image then fades to the diving scene, which is the next most important scene in terms of symbolism and theme. This scene is a recreation of the opening sequence of her birth. She even later says that she imagines she's becoming someone else, sort of like a rebirth, prophesizing the birth of her offspring with the puppet master. It's also important to note the color symbolism. The water is very blue, and the sky is very orange. These are opposite complementary colors. As she rises, the two meet and blend somewhat, symbolizing her union with the puppet master, as he is said to be her opposite, or reflection, and also the idea that the mind and body are actually one entity. Bateau and Motoko talk, and she expresses that she feels restricted within boundaries. This sets up motivation for allowing herself to integrate with the puppet master. At the end of that scene, the puppet master delivers the Bible quote about seeing face to face. This deeply unnerves Motoko, and the next scene is her on the ferry pondering her own humanity. She makes eye contact with a cyborg of the exact same model as her, and she has a tormented expression, which is really the most facial expression we get out of her in the whole film. She clearly feels that she is not human in a typical sense. She looks at buildings under construction, perhaps because she is wondering if all she is another human construction. This idea is reinforced when we see the long shots of mannequins, some with similar haircuts to her, some nude like she often is, and some even without arms, which is foreshadowing to when she loses her arms later. There are multiple copies of posters on the walls, perhaps a comparison to her mass production. We see signs saying things like, ensuring lifelike performance, like how Motoko's body is merely a lifelike performance. There are also long takes of garbage like bicycles and other tools in the water to symbolize her anxieties of being discarded this way once she is no longer useful. This is also foreshadowing because after she breaks her body trying to destroy the tank, she is thrown in the water, unable to move. I believe the rain in this scene is also meant to express her inner sadness. The turning point of her inner turmoil is when she learns that the fully cybernetic brain of the puppet master may have a ghost. She expresses her concerns to Bateau that she may be entirely synthetic as well. Both these worries and her desire to break past her boundaries motivate her to get to the puppet master first. When they speak, the puppet master offers her an answer to her inner identity problems by telling her that holding on to her identity will only restrict her, and that people are in a constant state of change anyways. This appeals to her desire to expand herself as well. He also gets into how they are like mirror images of each other. He can move around unhindered in the network, and she can move around in the physical world. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the major themes. There was some minor religious elements, like the Corinthians quote, and how the union of Motoko and the puppet master was described as some sort of spiritual ascension, complete with angelic imagery. The whole topic of mind-body dualism goes on and is really worth researching on your own. The sequel to this, Ghost in the Shell Innocence, is supposedly even more abstract. I haven't seen it, but I'll give it a watch. I have seen the show Standalone Complex, which is incredible and is just as good as this film. It's just, a whole show, so you get so much more out of it. I haven't read the manga either, but I hear it's great. It's just more tech-heavy as opposed to philosophy-heavy like the movie. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Ghost in the Shell. I'm not sure what film I'll be doing next, but feel free to leave your suggestions in the comment box or any other questions or comments or critiques on my analysis. Thank you so much for watching again, and please keep watching movies.